Hello everyone, this is Self-Critical Chloe, and this is going to be actually my first video ever. Right now I'm going to be working on a self-character of mine, Vanna Inara, and since the video, or not the video, but the game Cyberpunk was coming out soon, I figured I would try to take a character I already had and work them into a cyberpunk scenario. So hopefully I'm doing okay by doing this, as it's generally outside of my field of, definitely outside of my art style. As far as art goes, I've only been doing digital art for approximately a month. Technically a little bit longer, but I had a hand injury and wasn't able to draw for 3 weeks. So this is really about a month of actual experience. So alright, I will try to talk about what I'm doing as I do it. For the most part though, I did run into a couple of issues where I did lose footage. For example, there is a area somewhere where I lost about 30 minutes of footage and it just suddenly like jumps over. As far as for what I looked up for references and everything like that, some of the things that I noticed for a lot of pictures when I was looking at cyberpunk stuff was neon lighting on clothing, sometimes very vibrant, sharp angles. And one of the things that I tend to do a little bit is I will tend to work with most of my values roughly in the same area, so you'll see the background color jump a few times. Like I generally tend to work in blues a lot, especially when working with Vanna. It's just kind of a habit that I've had, and essentially right there all I was doing was breaking up a silhouette so that I could eventually take everything and separate it out. But as I was saying, right now I'm picking out colors and everything like that, or trying to get a general idea of what I'm thinking along the lines here. For the orange sections, what I was thinking with this was I was going to probably use a multiply layer and use some sort of glow effect or something like that to get this to be the neon lighting on the clothing. Unfortunately, this orange didn't end up working out, and you'll actually see me redo this chest suit piece like 6 or 7 times. Like, no joke, I redo it a lot. In terms for layers, right now all I'm doing is separating things out, making it easier to work with, and blocking in just some rough shadow shapes and everything like that. The sketch that I did, that will go away almost entirely at some point. I bring it back here and there, but for the most part, it just goes to the background and doesn't really do anything. Unfortunately, you guys can probably also hear all the stuff that's going on in my background at the same time. I'm trying to record this at night mostly just so that it's less busy in my house. So right here I got the bright idea to again redo this, and this time um, split up the lighting onto a separate layer. And again, I do this probably 3 or 4 times and it just doesn't work out. And here I'm cycling through the layers just to see what I can find to blend it properly, and none of them really work out. And luckily the color does end up working out significantly better for the tattoos that I planned out. Um, Hooray! Uh, to be honest, I don't really do very well with light. I mostly do better with finding my way around where the shadows are supposed to go. And based off where the shadows are is how I pretty much determine where light is supposed to go. Um, and here I am about to just pump out like my first attempt on a gun like ever. So honestly, not really all that sure what I should be talking about in these particular scenarios. Because I do want to talk about something uh, just so that my videos aren't super bland and boring and actually have something going on other than the artwork. Um, Honestly, like I said, I am a relatively new artist. I've only been drawing for a month. So if you have any tips that you see that I'm doing that maybe I could improve or something like that, or maybe you yourself are a new artist and want to know something specific, go ahead and ask in the comments or tell me something in the comments, and uh, that will definitely help. Or at least hopefully that will help me improve to the point, because that's one of the ways that I've pretty much learned everything so far is just by watching other artists. Here I'm gonna end up doing a lot of work that I end up not using in the final piece. Uh, I started working with this and the colors just did not seem to be blending as well as I was hoping, um, and kind of started to get on my nerves just a little bit, so I pretty much walked away from it before I spent too much time on it, because that entire piece right there, which you just saw, like in like a 1 minute segment, was actually like 30 minutes of screwing around with the ear, and it ended up being something that I just didn't use at all. Um, I also have a problem to where, like, when I'm avoiding something or not wanting to do something, etc., I go back to certain areas and start rendering them more and more. And in this particular case, I was avoiding the face because I was like, well, what do I want to do for the face? Because, like, one of the big things that I noticed in some of the pictures was they all had some sort of cyberware or advanced gadgetry on their face or something like that. And I just wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do there. So I was kind of avoiding the face during this time and just working on rendering the hands and the skin areas, um, which I'm actually kind of happy how the perspective for the hand turned out. Um, it took a little bit of work to get that to come out just properly, and definitely happy with that especially. Now, if you're actually curious who Vanna Inara is, she's actually one of my D&D characters who I'm pulling into the cyberpunk realm, and hopefully I start hitting that mark later on when I start styling everything. I was trying pretty hard to hit the cyberpunk mark, especially with the pistol, because I wasn't really sure what to do with it, so I was trying to make it look as techy as possible. Another thing that I actually noticed was neon tattoos, and I definitely liked that idea, so I played around with some of the settings a little bit, and I actually really like the way that these tattoos turned out in terms of color. And here you are again getting to see me redo the suit again, because I decided to merge everything down last time and just ended up reworking it even on this one. And stupid roommate in the background, you can probably hear him yelling about his game right now. Sorry. Um, so the goal for the orange sections on the suit was this was initially supposed to be neon lighting, so I was trying to get some semblance of that set up prior to trying to add in any more effects or blending or anything like that, and trying to get this to the degree that I actually wanted it. And I end up changing just these simple lines like quite a bit because it's like I even end up like rotating to get better um, to get better lines for those. And then I end up cycling through and being like, well, I don't really like any of these blending layers either. So I tossed the glow effect on it eventually, and I was like, okay, well, how do I want that glow to affect the suit? And I just end up going into a spiral to where I end up changing the suit again. But luckily I don't, like, at this point I haven't, like, remerged down the lines, so, or the neon lighting, so, the good news is that from here on out, I learned my lesson of just don't merge it down until I actually needed to. So I didn't like what I was doing previously, so I was like, oh, well, let's try going in with a soft brush, and I was just thinking, well, this looks a little too soft, and then on top of that, the character seems to be having a couple of problems defining how their suit actually flows, so on and so forth. And it's looking rather unsymmetrical, which, or not necessarily unsymmetrical, but it doesn't look like the body is properly portrayed, and I pretty much figured that out, and this is where I lost a good chunk of footage. Um, and here I'm actually adding the glow effect, seeing if I like what comes up, and I messed with that for quite a while, and that's where I lost about 30 minutes of footage. And you can see what I'm talking about, because the chest region, what do you call it, just suddenly like changed in appearance, and at this point I finally figured out, like, oh, well, I know what I'm gonna do for the face. So I started blocking in like a rough shape for a mask, and then I was like, okay, well, start refining it down to the shape that I actually want, and get everything set up. And I'm actually really glad with how the mask turned out as well, because I just kind of pumped this thing out in like an hour, roughly, in its entirety. So, um, again, here, all I'm trying to do is get default shades in um, for how I want to shade things, and trying to block things in for the way that I want things to be. Um, and again, apologize for my roommate who is laughing hysterically in the background, retardedly loud. Um, but yeah. Uh, but yeah. At this point, though, I'm definitely liking how the mask shape turned out, and it's coming together for me in general. I got the idea that for the cyber mask, like, I really wanted something that uh, didn't necessarily cover her full head, but would like wrap around her head entirely. Like have like a back portion, kind of like how you see some of those COVID masks, and uh, have more like cyber eyes and everything like that to it. Um, so I definitely like the aesthetic that came out, and here's me playing with a little bit of lighting effects and everything like that um, on it, trying to figure out, well, what do I actually want to do with it and everything like that. And I end up cycling through and ultimately just end up changing the color entirely to a yellow to make it match more. And also end up doing the same uh, to the neon lighting on the suit. And at this point, I'm finally like, don't worry, this is the last time I redo the suit. But I finally decided that, okay, I had too many soft edges. I needed to have some hard edges in with the soft edges, and I ended up just going with almost purely hard edges, with a more messy, brushy look, and kind of enjoyed this a little bit more. Um, and I just end up working it back and forth a little bit before I end up deciding that the neon lighting line right below this portion is is a little too high and needs to be reworked. And here I am finishing up some of the final portions for the skin and such, and this is where I finally decided to move that line down and then go and fix uh, the neon lighting area. I still have some of the sketch up here, mostly just so I can start on the hair, and I did not like how this was turning out at all. So I ended up going and making a different brush entirely for hair, and it was definitely starting to annoy me that I kept on accidentally hitting the bar to pull it into a smaller frame. That was definitely super annoying. I played with the idea of doing a neon color for the hair as well, and just ended up keeping her with her standard gray and white hair, which definitely seems more characteristic for her. If you're actually curious about the eyes on the mask, I end up coming back to those, but the lenses for those are actually Vanna's actual eye color as well. So I wanted to keep some elements from the original character when I pulled her in, so that's where the color actually comes from. And this right here is after I've already made the new brush and starting to actually get the details in and start working this through, get in highlights and shadows and stuff like that for the hair. So if you're curious about how long this took in total, this entire thing in total took roughly 6 hours. Here in a moment though, I am getting ready to add a little bit more texture to the suit, mostly because I decided that it was missing something and it just seemed a little too plain. But I do that after I work on the eyes and start getting them set up. They did bother me a little bit, but once I added that glow in, it just seemed to pop a tad bit more. I do end up ultimately going over the glow in my final cleanup phase. But here again, I'm going through adding a few more details into the mask and reestablishing some of the line work and hard edges there. And I go back and do the same thing for the gun, just to make sure that I have a couple of spots that definitely look like they are supposed to be like deep ridges or something of the sort. I played around with the idea of doing it in other areas as well, but ended up not keeping it. Here is the texture that I was talking about. I actually paused the video made this texture, um, and then pulled it over into this one and just kind of warped it to the point that I wanted, and ended up only using it for a portion of it, and just changed the opacity down to make it look like there's a little bit more of a texture on at least part of the suit. Go back through and added in some more of the highlights and whatnot as well. And really like the way that the lighting for the neon lights on that came out. Definitely came out very nice, in my opinion. And at this stage, though, I've finally merged everything back together. I'm going through and doing some of my final cleanup on the piece. And one of the things that I definitely wanted to happen is I wanted those neon light areas to protrude from the suit a little bit and be a little bit thicker material than the suit. And here I'm adjusting some of the curves and wrapping up on some of the final stuff. Again, if I didn't say this before, the piece in total took me roughly 6 hours to do, which is a considerably shorter time than anything I've ever done previously. And for the most part, I just go through all of this, playing with settings, checking values, and contrast and stuff like that. I'm not one on backgrounds at all, so do not expect any fancy background. This actually goes outside of the allotted video area, so I'll toss the actual picture up here, and some of the things that I do after every time I actually do something, I like to take a moment, be happy with what I did, but it wouldn't be quite good if I just left it at that. So some of the things that I definitely liked about the piece were the lighting. I like how the lighting turned out. I like how the tattoos turned out. I loved the face mask. The gun was actually really easy, but if I said there was one thing that I really wanted to learn or pull out of it, definitely want to learn more about materials and clothing. It's something that I struggle with, as well as possibly backgrounds, as I never do backgrounds. As you see, the teal background is about the most that I can muster. Anyways, that's it for now. Have a nice night.